The champagne tasted like artificial sweetener and broken dreams on my tongue. I sat alone at table 19, the table furthest from the bride and groom, reserved for obligation invites and workplace pity. My burgundy bridesmaid dress, purchased secondhand and altered in my apartment with trembling fingers, felt tight across my ribs, a constant reminder that I didn't belong among the designer gowns that floated around me like exotic birds. Another solo attendee, the server's sympathetic smile stung more than any outright mockery as she topped off my glass. "Don't worry, honey. Weddings are meat markets. Someone might still notice you." I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes and watched her glide away to more important guests. The wedding reception of Elise Montgomery, my childhood friend turned successful interior designer, sparkled with wealth and privilege in the grand ballroom of the Ashford Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast diamonds of light across marble floors, where I'd never be able to afford even a coffee in the lobby. The centerpiece on my table, a towering arrangement of white orchids and sterling roses, probably cost more than my monthly rent. The strings of the quartet vibrated through the floor, through the delicate bones of my ankles, as I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. I shouldn't have come. Elise and I hadn't been close since high school, when her family's money had sent her to an exclusive boarding school while I stayed behind, working part-time jobs to help my single mother keep our electricity on. But the invitation had arrived, thick cream cardstock with gold embossing that felt like a guilt trip, and a lifeline simultaneously. "You should come," she'd said during our awkward coffee meetup, her diamond engagement ring catching the light with every gesture. "It'll be fun, and maybe you'll meet someone. God knows you need to get out more, Sophie." Now, surrounded by clusters of laughing guests who didn't bother to glance my way, I regretted my decision. My phone battery hovered at 12%, not enough to fake important texts for the next 3 hours until I could politely leave. The half-empty champagne glass before me promised temporary relief, but I'd already begun to feel the dangerous warmth of alcohol that might lead to tears if I wasn't careful. The sudden hush that fell over the room wasn't immediate. It rippled outward from the entrance like a stone dropped in still water. Conversations stuttered and died. The quartet faltered for just 2 beats before resuming with renewed vigor. I turned, curious despite myself. 3 men entered. No, 1 man entered, flanked by 2 others. Even from across the ballroom, I could feel the difference. The 2 men on either side were barriers, not companions. Expensive suits stretched across broad shoulders, eyes constantly scanning the crowd with mechanical precision. But the man between them, he moved like every step was deliberate, unhurried, yet purposeful, tall, with dark hair cut close at the sides but longer on top, styled with careless perfection. His suit wasn't just expensive. It was bespoke, charcoal gray material that seemed to absorb and reflect light differently than those around him. He couldn't have been older than 35. His face all sharp angles and shadows, impossible cheekbones that caught the chandelier light. Even from a distance, I could see his eyes, pale against olive skin, sweeping the room with ownership, not curiosity. I realized I'd been holding my breath and forced myself to exhale, looking away quickly when his gaze moved toward my corner. Something about him made my skin prickle with awareness, like the air before a summer storm. "That's Luca Ricci," whispered a woman at the neighboring table, not bothering to lower her voice enough. "I can't believe Elise's father invited him." "Business connections," her companion murmured back. "You don't get to where James Montgomery is without making certain arrangements. Still, everyone knows what he really does. Those buildings downtown, the new waterfront development, blood money." I glanced up again, unable to help myself. Blood money. The words should have repelled me, but instead I felt a shameful fascination. In my world of double shifts and discount groceries, danger was mundane. Unpaid bills, broken down cars, eviction notices. His kind of danger seemed almost luxurious by comparison. The bride appeared at his side suddenly, her white gown luminous against his dark suit. They exchanged kisses on both cheeks, and Elise's nervous smile told me everything. Respect mingled with fear. Her father joined them, shaking the man's hand with strained cordiality. Not a friend, then. A necessary evil. I dropped my gaze to my champagne, swirling the bubbles and trying to appear invisible. The last thing I needed was to catch the attention of someone important enough to cause that kind of reaction. I'd finish this drink, wait until the dancing began, and slip out unnoticed. Maybe I could even... Is this seat taken? The voice cut through my thoughts like a knife. Low, slightly accented, and undeniably directed at me. I looked up, and my heart stopped. Luca Ricci stood beside my table, one hand resting casually on the back of the empty chair next to mine. Up close, his eyes were the color of Arctic ice, contrasting sharply with olive skin and dark brows. A thin scar traced the edge of his jawline, somehow enhancing rather than marring his features. He smelled of something expensive and subtle, sandalwood and amber maybe, with undertones I couldn't identify. Behind him, at a careful distance, stood one of his guards, gaze sweeping continuously, one hand always near his jacket. The other had positioned himself by the nearest exit. No, I managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. It's not taken. Something that wasn't quite a smile touched his lips. Good. Instead of sitting, he remained standing, his gaze moving deliberately over the empty chairs, the untouched place settings, the obvious isolation of my position. The silence stretched between us until it became unbearable. Not exactly the place of honor, is it? He finally said, his accent wrapping around the words like silk over steel. Heat rushed to my face. I'm just happy to be included. Are you? His eyebrow arched slightly. You don't look happy, Sophie. My blood turned to ice. How do you know my name? That almost smile again, revealing nothing. I make it my business to know who's who at events I attend. Before I could respond, a commotion near the bridal table drew attention. The groom's drunken college friend was making an impromptu speech, champagne sloshing dangerously close to the bride's gown. Several guests looked embarrassed, others amused. Through it all, I felt Luca's gaze remain fixed on me. Your friend has expensive taste, he commented, nodding toward the bride, who was now laughing uncomfortably as her new husband tried to reclaim the microphone. This wedding must have cost close to $500,000. The flowers alone were imported from 3 different countries. I shifted uncomfortably. Elise and I grew up together. We don't really run in the same circles anymore. And yet here you are, wearing a dress that cost you a week's salary, sitting alone at the reject table. His bluntness should have offended me, but the accuracy of his assessment left no room for denial. Why come at all? The question pierced through my carefully constructed defenses. Why had I come? To prove something? To whom? Myself? Elise? The ghost of our friendship? I was invited, I said finally, the lameness of my response hanging in the air between us. Luca tilted his head slightly, studying me with unnerving intensity. Some invitations are obligations disguised as opportunities, Sophie. The way he said my name, softly emphasizing both syllables, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. I took another sip of champagne to hide my reaction, but when I glanced up, the knowing look in his eyes told me I'd failed. Mr. Ricci, a voice interrupted. A thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and nervous hands appeared at Luca's elbow, careful not to touch him. Mr. Montgomery is asking if you might join him for a moment. There are some people he'd like you to meet. Luca didn't acknowledge the man immediately, his eyes still fixed on me. Then, with deliberate slowness, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a silver card case. His fingers, adorned with a single platinum ring on his right hand, extracted a business card that he placed on the table before me. The father of the bride is about to introduce me to potential investors who don't know what they're getting themselves into, he said, his voice pitched for my ears alone. Save me from tedious conversation in 20 minutes. Come find me and act like you need to speak with me urgently. I stared at the card. Heavy stock, minimalist design, just a name and phone number in understated type. Why would I do that? He leaned closer, and I caught another breath of that intoxicating scent. Because you're as bored as I am, and we both know you're looking for an excuse to leave early without seeming rude. His gaze flicked toward the dance floor, where couples had begun to gather. Besides, I need a partner for at least one dance, and you're the only person here who won't try to impress me with their stock portfolio or their father's connections. Before I could formulate a response, he straightened and turned to follow the nervous assistant. Over his shoulder, he added, 20 minutes, Sophie. Don't make me come looking for you. I watched him walk away, moving through the crowd that parted before him like water around a stone. His guards fell into step behind him, nearly invisible despite their size. The business card sat on the table between my fingertips, its edges sharp and perfect. This was madness. I didn't know this man, beyond whispers of blood money, and the instinctive wariness he inspired in everyone around him. Engaging with him would be like voluntarily stepping into quicksand. The sensible thing, the safe thing, would be to leave now, card untouched, and forget this strange encounter. Instead, I slipped the card into my clutch and checked the delicate vintage watch that had been my grandmother's, the only piece of jewelry I owned worth anything. 18 minutes. I used the time to visit the restroom, where I pinched color into my pale cheeks and reapplied my lipstick with trembling fingers. In the mirror, my reflection looked both familiar and strange. Brown eyes too wide, dark hair pulled back in a style I'd copied from a YouTube tutorial, the second-hand dress that fit well enough but lacked the effortless luxury of those around me. "What are you doing?" I whispered to my reflection. No answer came. When I emerged, the reception was in full swing. The dance floor pulsed with bodies. The music had transitioned from elegant quartet to a more contemporary band, and the alcohol had loosened ties and inhibitions. I spotted Luca immediately, standing at the edge of a circle of men in similar suits, his posture relaxed but somehow separate. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up, those pale eyes finding mine across the room. Something electric passed between us, a current of recognition, of anticipation. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, and he raised his whiskey glass in the smallest acknowledgement before returning his attention to the conversation. My heart pounded against my ribs as I made my way toward him, skirting the dance floor, nodding at acquaintances who suddenly seemed to notice me now that I had direction, purpose. One of his guards saw me approaching and shifted position, eyes assessing me with clinical detachment before whispering something into an earpiece. I hesitated at the edge of the group. The men were laughing at something Elise's father had said, but Luca wasn't laughing. He was watching, observing, his attention appearing to be on the conversation, while his awareness extended outward like ripples. "Mr. Ricci?" I forced my voice to remain steady. "I'm so sorry to interrupt." All eyes turned to me. James Montgomery's smile faltered, his gaze sliding from me to Luca with poorly concealed displeasure. "Ah, Sophie." Luca's voice carried a warmth that hadn't been there before, transforming his face with practiced ease. He extended his hand toward me, and I took it without thinking. His fingers closed around mine, warm and firm. "Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me. This is important." Without waiting for their response, he guided me away, his hand moving to the small of my back with casual possession. The guard fell into step behind us, maintaining a discreet distance. "Perfect timing," he murmured, steering me toward a quieter corner near tall windows that overlooked the city lights. 5 more minutes of that conversation, and someone would have mysteriously disappeared from the guest list. I couldn't tell if he was joking. "I'm glad I could help." "You didn't just help, Sophie. You saved me." He stopped when we reached the windows, turning to face me, his hand still resting lightly against my back. "And now I'm going to return the favor." "What do you mean?" "I mean that everyone in this room has spent the last 3 hours either ignoring you or pitying you, and in about 30 seconds, they're going to be consumed with curiosity and envy instead." Before I could process his words, the band transitioned to a slower song. Luca's hand slid from my back to capture my fingers again. "Dance with me." It wasn't a request. His hand closed around mine with gentle firmness, and I found myself following him to the dance floor, as if pulled by an invisible string. My mind screamed warnings. This man was dangerous, unknown, powerful in ways I couldn't comprehend. But my body moved forward, drawn by something I couldn't name. The dance floor parted for him without effort. Couples shifted aside, conversations halted mid-sentence, and eyes followed our progress with undisguised interest. When Luca turned to face me at the center of the floor, one hand settling at my waist while the other still held mine, I felt the weight of 100 stares pressing against my skin. "Everyone's watching," I whispered, my fingers trembling slightly against the expensive fabric of his jacket. "Yes," he agreed, pulling me closer with subtle pressure. "That's the point." He moved with unexpected grace, guiding me into the rhythm of the slow jazz number. My dance experience was limited to awkward high school formals and the occasional wedding, but Luca led with such confidence that I found myself following effortlessly. His body telegraphed each step before it happened, making me appear far more coordinated than I was. "Relax," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "You're doing fine. Why are you doing this?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why me?" His pale eyes studied me for a long moment, and I had the unsettling feeling he was seeing past the careful mask I'd constructed for the evening, straight to the insecurities beneath. "Perhaps I saw something familiar," he finally said, his accent deepening. "Someone who doesn't belong, but is trying very hard to pretend otherwise." I stiffened in his arms. I was invited. So was I. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That doesn't mean either of us was wanted." The truth of his words stung more than I cared to admit. I glanced over his shoulder, catching Elise watching us from her seat at the head table, her perfect features creased with confusion and concern. Near her, James Montgomery was deep in conversation with another man, his gestures agitated as he repeatedly glanced our way. "Your presence seems to be causing some distress," I noted, nodding subtly in their direction. Luca didn't bother to look. "Montgomery owes me favors he can't repay." My invitation was his attempt at public reconciliation. His thumb traced a small circle against my waist, an absent gesture that sent warmth spreading through my body. "But we're not here to discuss business. Tell me about Sophie." "There's nothing to tell." "I disagree." We turned slowly, his steps guiding me away from a couple who'd ventured too close. "You work at the public library downtown. Children's section. You live alone in an apartment on Westwood, where the rent increases every year while the maintenance decreases. Your car is at least 10 years old, but you keep it immaculate. You have coffee every Tuesday at Blackbird Cafe, always the same table by the window, always with a book." Cold fear washed over me, replacing the warmth that had been building. I tried to pull away, but his arm tightened almost imperceptibly, keeping me close. "How do you know all that?" My voice had dropped to a whisper. "Don't look so frightened," he said, though his expression suggested my fear pleased him somehow. "I told you. I make it my business to know who's at events I attend. When I saw your name on the guest list, I became curious. That doesn't explain why you'd investigate a random bridesmaid. Nothing about my investigations is random, Sophie." The music was building toward its conclusion, and he adjusted our steps accordingly, drawing me even closer. And my curiosity was rewarded. "You're much more interesting than your circumstances suggest." I couldn't decide if I was flattered or terrified. Perhaps both. "Most people don't consider librarians particularly fascinating. Most people are idiots," he said it matter-of-factly without malice. "They see the surface, a woman in a second-hand dress at a wedding where she doesn't belong, and they dismiss you. They don't see the woman who reads Russian literature in the original language, who volunteers at the homeless shelter on Sundays, who saved 3 months of coffee money to buy art supplies for the children's program." The music ended, but he didn't release me immediately. Instead, he leaned closer, his lips nearly brushing my ear. "I see you, Sophie. That's why I chose you." Before I could respond, he stepped back, keeping only my hand in his, the spell of the dance floor broken. I became acutely aware of the attention we'd attracted. Elise was now standing, making her way toward us with determination, her white gown swishing angrily against the floor. "I believe your friend wants to reclaim you," Luca said, watching her approach with mild amusement. "Come. I need some air, and you need an escape before she interrogates you." He led me from the dance floor with the same confident ease, his hand now resting possessively at the small of my back. One of his guards materialized ahead of us, opening a side door that led to a private terrace I hadn't known existed. The second guard remained inside, positioned to intercept anyone who might follow. The night air hit my flushed skin like a blessing. The terrace overlooked the city skyline, lights twinkling against the darkness like fallen stars. Luca guided me to the stone balustrade, but didn't remove his hand from my back. "Better?" he asked. I nodded. drawing a deep breath of cool air. "How did you know about the Russian literature?" He smiled, a real one this time that transformed his face from handsome to breathtaking. "You left your copy of Anna Karenina on your table at Blackbird last Tuesday. Original text, well-worn, with your notes in the margins." "You were there?" I tried to recall the patrons of the small cafe, but couldn't place him among them. "No." He turned, leaning his hip against the balustrade, studying me. "But my men were. They took pictures." The casual admission sent a chill through me despite the warmth of his hand still resting against my spine. "Why? I'm nobody. That's where you're wrong." His voice had dropped lower, more intimate somehow, though we were completely alone on the terrace. "You're exactly who I need." Before I could ask what he meant, the terrace door opened. Luca's guard stepped aside to admit a server carrying a tray with 2 glasses of champagne. The man set the tray on a small table, bowed slightly, and retreated without a word. "I didn't order any drinks," I said, confusion momentarily displacing my unease. "I did," before we arrived. Luca released me to retrieve the glasses, offering one to me. I find it's best to anticipate needs before they arise. I accepted the champagne, noting that it was different from what had been served inside. The liquid a deeper gold, the bubbles finer. One sip confirmed my suspicion. This was exponentially more expensive than what had been poured at my table. "So," I said, gathering my courage, "are you going to tell me what this is really about? Why you've been having me followed? Why you singled me out tonight?" He took his time answering, sipping his champagne and looking out over the city lights. When he finally spoke, his voice had a different quality, harder, more businesslike. "Your friend Elise's new husband, David Chen. You knew him before they met, didn't you?" The question caught me off guard. "Yes. We worked together briefly at the university library before he moved to his current firm. That's how they met. He came back to donate some rare books, and Elise was redesigning the reading room." I frowned, uncertain where this was leading. "Why?" "And you dated." It wasn't a question. Heat rushed to my face, part embarrassment, part indignation. "Very briefly. It was nothing serious, just a few dinners before he met Elise." I set my glass down on the balustrade with more force than intended. "Is that what this is about? You're digging into my failed dating history for some business reason? Is David involved in something?" Luca's expression remained impassive, but something dangerous flickered in his pale eyes. "David Chen has been moving money through charitable foundations, including substantial donations to the library where you work. On the surface, it appears philanthropic. Underneath, it's something else entirely." My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. The library had indeed received a major anonymous donation 6 months ago, funds earmarked specifically for the children's program I ran. It had seemed like a miracle at the time, allowing us to expand services we'd been forced to cut due to budget constraints. "Are you saying David made those donations? That they're, what, illegal?" "I'm saying that Mr. Chen has been laundering money for competitors of mine, using his position at his investment firm and his connections to charitable organizations." Luca's voice remained calm, conversational, as if discussing the weather rather than criminal activities. "Money that was taken from me through means I find disrespectful." The implication slowly crystallized in my mind, horror building with each passing second. "And you think I'm involved somehow, because I dated him years ago, or because I work at the library that received donations?" Luca studied me for a long moment, his gaze penetrating. Then he smiled slightly. "No, Sophie. If I thought you were involved, we wouldn't be having this pleasant conversation on a terrace." The quiet menace beneath his words made my blood run cold. I glanced toward the door, suddenly aware of how isolated we were, how completely at his mercy. "Then why am I here?" My voice emerged steadier than I felt. "Because you're my way in." He stepped closer, eliminating the distance between us. "David still cares for you. It's obvious in the way he watches you when Elise isn't looking." The regret in his eyes. I shook my head. "You're mistaken. David loves Elise. He barely remembers me." "Men like David don't forget women like you, Sophie. They just learn to hide their desires better." His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from my face, his touch feather-light yet commanding. "And I need you to help me use that desire to recover what's mine. Understanding dawned with sickening clarity. You want me to… what? Seduce him? Spy on him? I won't do it. Nothing so crude. His fingers lingered against my cheek. I simply need you to renew your friendship. Accept his offers of support for your library programs. Meet with him when he suggests it. And occasionally, share what you learn with me. I stepped back, bumping against the balustrade. And if I refuse… Something cold and reptilian moved behind his eyes, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. The funding for your beloved children's programs would unfortunately dry up. The library might face unexpected tax audits, zoning issues. Your apartment building could change ownership, leading to eviction for all tenants during necessary renovations. Your mother's nursing home might suddenly find her insurance coverage insufficient. Each threat was delivered in the same conversational tone, making them all the more terrifying. I stared at him. This beautiful man who had danced with me so tenderly minutes ago, now revealing the monster beneath the charm. Why me? I whispered. Why not use one of your own people? Because you're already trusted, you have history. And most importantly, he reached out again, this time trailing his fingers down the exposed skin of my arm. You have something no one I employ possesses. Genuine innocence. David will never suspect you because you are exactly what you appear to be. A kind, hard-working woman who cares deeply about books and children and making the world a little better. His words, meant to manipulate, still pierced me with their accuracy. I turned away, looking out at the city lights that now seemed cold and distant. How long? I asked, my voice hollow. Until I have what I need. And then what? You'll just let me go back to my life? He moved to stand beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. If you serve me well, Sophie, your life will be considerably improved. The children's programs will receive funding beyond your wildest dreams. Your mother will have the best care available. Your career will advance. And if I go to the police right now? Luca laughed softly. With what evidence? The word of a librarian against one of the city's most respected businessmen? Besides, he added, his voice dropping to a whisper, half the department is on my payroll. The other half knows better than to interfere in my affairs. I closed my eyes, feeling trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. Everything in me rebelled against what he was asking, yet I could see no way out that didn't result in destruction, not just for me, but for everyone I cared about. I need your answer, Sophie. His hand settled on my waist again, warm and heavy through the thin material of my dress. Will you help me? Before I could respond, the terrace door opened again. Luca's guard appeared, his expression tight. Sir, Montgomery is looking for you. He's becoming insistent. Luca's jaw clenched momentarily, the only sign of irritation he allowed himself. Tell him I'll be there shortly. The guard nodded and withdrew, closing the door behind him. It seems our time is cut short, Luca said, turning back to me. I'll need your decision, Sophie. I don't have a choice, do I? The words tasted bitter on my tongue. We always have choices. He stepped closer, until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Some are just more difficult than others. His proximity was overwhelming. The subtle scent of his cologne, the warmth of his breath, the intensity of his gaze. Despite everything, despite knowing what he was and what he wanted from me, my traitorous body responded to him, heart racing, skin flushing. If I do this, I said, forcing strength into my voice, I have conditions. His eyebrow arched in surprise, then amusement. Conditions? No one gets hurt. Not David, not Elise, not anyone else. This is between you and him. I won't help you punish innocent people. Luca studied me for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Agreed. No innocent blood. As for David, he shrugged elegantly. That depends entirely on his cooperation. It wasn't the guarantee I wanted, but I suspected it was the best I would get. And when it's over, you'll leave me alone. Completely. No more surveillance. No more involvement in my life. This time, he didn't answer immediately. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing across my cheekbone with surprising tenderness. We'll discuss terms when the time comes. For now, he leaned forward, his lips brushing my ear. I need to return inside before Montgomery sends a search party. You should wait 5 minutes, then follow. We shouldn't be seen leaving together. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he nodded once, decisively. I'll contact you tomorrow with details. Until then, Sophie. With that, he released me and walked to the door, his movements fluid and controlled. Just before exiting, he paused, looking back over his shoulder. Thank you for the dance. It was the only sincere moment of my evening. Then he was gone, leaving me alone on the terrace with the weight of what I'd just agreed to pressing down on my chest like a stone. I turned back to the city lights, gripping the balustrade until my knuckles turned white, trying to steady my breathing. What had I done? What had I agreed to? And why? Despite the fear and moral revulsion churning in my stomach, did part of me feel more alive than I had in years? Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed in my narrow bed, replaying every moment of my encounter with Luca, searching for some way out of the trap I'd willingly walked into. By the time dawn's gray light filtered through my thin curtains, I'd convinced myself it had all been an elaborate mind game, that Luca Ricci had simply been amusing himself with the lonely bridesmaid, that his threats and propositions were nothing but cruel entertainment. Then my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Good morning, Sophie. Car will arrive at 9:30. Wear something casual but elegant. La. My stomach twisted into knots. This was real. All of it. I considered ignoring the message, pretending I'd never received it, but the memory of his cold, precise threats kept me from deleting it. Instead, I dragged myself to the shower, letting the hot water wash away the night's restless thoughts, if not the anxiety that had settled into my bones. My apartment, a small one-bedroom in a building that had seen better days decades ago, felt suddenly vulnerable, exposed. Had his men been here? Had they cataloged my possessions, my habits, my weaknesses? I glanced at the framed photo of my mother and me on the bookshelf, taken before her illness had stolen her independence, and felt a renewed surge of determination. I would play Luca's game, but on my terms. Somehow, I would protect everyone I cared about. At precisely 9:30, my phone chimed again. Outside. No name this time. None needed. I smoothed down the navy blue dress I'd chosen. Simple, modest, the most expensive item in my closet aside from the bridesmaid dress, and took a deep breath before leaving my apartment. On the street below, a sleek black Bentley waited, its windows tinted to obscurity. As I approached, the rear door opened, but the interior remained shadowed. Miss Miller. The driver, one of the guards from the wedding, nodded politely as I hesitated by the open door. Mr. Ricci is expecting you. Expecting, not waiting. The distinction was clear. I slid into the cool leather interior, half expecting to find Luca beside me, but the back seat was empty. The door closed with a soft, expensive thud, sealing me inside the whisper-quiet cabin. The privacy partition was raised, leaving me isolated with my mounting anxiety as the car pulled smoothly into traffic. We drove for 20 minutes, leaving my familiar neighborhood behind, winding through progressively more affluent areas until we turned onto a private drive hidden behind wrought iron gates. The estate that came into view took my breath away. A modern mansion of glass and stone perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, surrounded by meticulously landscaped grounds and protected by a discreet but unmistakable security presence. The car stopped at the main entrance where another guard opened my door. This way, please. I followed him through massive double doors into an entrance hall that could have housed my entire apartment with room to spare. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating contemporary art pieces that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. Everything was tasteful, expensive, and impersonal, like a museum rather than a home. Sophie. Luca's voice echoed slightly in the vast space. He descended a floating staircase, dressed in casual luxury, dark trousers and a light cashmere sweater that emphasized his lean strength. Thank you for coming. As if I'd had a choice. Your home is beautiful, I said, because it seemed safer than the accusations burning on my tongue. One of them. He gestured for me to follow him through the house. I rarely stay in one place for long. We passed through a series of stunning rooms, each designed to impress rather than comfort, until we reached a sunlit terrace overlooking the ocean. A table had been set for breakfast, the white linen cloth fluttering gently in the sea breeze. Please sit. He pulled out a chair for me, the picture of courtesy. Are you hungry? I wasn't, but refused to show weakness. Yes, thank you. He nodded to a waiting server, who immediately appeared with coffee and a selection of pastries that would have made a French patisserie envious. Luca waited until we were alone before speaking again. I imagine you have questions. I set down my coffee cup carefully, several hundred, but let's start with the most pressing. What exactly do you expect me to do? Direct. I appreciate that. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those pale, unsettling eyes. David Chen has been moving money, my money, through a series of charities, including your library's foundation. I need to know where that money is going, who else is involved, and most importantly, where he's keeping the documentation of these transactions. And you think he'll just tell me these things? A librarian he briefly dated years ago? No, but I think he'll try to reconnect with you, especially now that he's seen you with me. Luca's lips curved in a cold smile. Human nature is predictable. He'll be curious, perhaps even concerned. He'll want to know what your relationship is with someone like me. I frowned. You planned that? The dance, making sure everyone saw us together? I plan everything, Sophie. He said it without arrogance, a simple statement of fact. When David approaches you, and he will, you'll express mild concern about library funding. Mention the recent anonymous donation. Watch his reaction. And if he doesn't approach me, he will. Luca sipped his coffee with absolute certainty. But if something delays him, we'll create another opportunity, perhaps a fundraising event for the library, where your paths would naturally cross. The casual way he discussed manipulating people's lives, my life, made my skin crawl. Yet I couldn't deny his strategic mind. The careful construction of his trap. What happens when I get this information? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. What will you do with it? With him? Luca set down his cup, his expression unreadable. That depends entirely on what we discover, and how cooperative Mr. Chen decides to be. My preference is always for civilized resolution. Something in his tone suggested his definition of civilized might differ significantly from mine. I won't help you hurt anyone, I reminded him, meeting his gaze directly. So you've said. He studied me for a moment, then changed topics abruptly. Tell me about your work at the library. The sudden shift left me momentarily off balance. Why? Because I want to know. His tone made it clear this wasn't optional. So I told him about the children's reading programs I'd developed, the grant applications I wrote in my spare time, the mobile library initiative for underserved neighborhoods. To my surprise, he listened with apparent interest, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated he was actually paying attention. You care deeply about your work, he observed when I finished. Books saved me as a child. I want to give that same refuge to others. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Refuge? Yes. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, What did you need refuge from? The question was too personal, too close to vulnerabilities I kept carefully guarded. Everyone needs escape sometimes. He accepted my evasion with a slight nod. True enough. A discreet cough announced the arrival of one of his men, different from the wedding guards, this one older, with graying temples and shrewd eyes. Everything is arranged, sir, the man said. Thank you, Marco. Luca stood, extending his hand to me. Come, there's something I want to show you. Hesitantly, I placed my hand in his, allowing him to help me from my chair. His fingers closed around mine with that same gentle firmness from our dance, leading rather than forcing. He guided me through the house to a room I hadn't seen before, a library that took my breath away. 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling shelves housed what must have been thousands of volumes, many appearing rare and valuable. A spiral staircase connected to a balcony that wrapped around the entire space, while comfortable reading areas were arranged throughout. Unlike the rest of the house, this room felt lived in, personal. Oh, I breathed, unable to hide my reaction. Luca watched me, something like satisfaction in his expression. I thought you might appreciate this. Appreciate was an understatement. I moved forward as if drawn by a magnet, running my fingers lightly over leather bindings, cloth covers, examining titles in multiple languages. First editions sat alongside contemporary works, organized not by conventional library systems, but by some personal preference I couldn't immediately discern. "This is incredible," I admitted, forgetting for a moment who he was, what he represented. "Do you actually read all these?" "Everyone." He followed me as I explored, keeping a slight distance that nonetheless felt like closeness. Books were my first investment. Before properties, before businesses. I paused at a glass-fronted case containing what appeared to be ancient manuscripts. These must be worth a fortune. Their value to me isn't monetary. He moved beside me, opening the case with a key produced from his pocket. Carefully, he removed a small, leather-bound volume. This was the first book I ever purchased for myself. I was 12. He handed it to me, and I accepted it with reverent hands. A first edition of Machiavelli's The Prince in the original Italian. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Appropriate," I murmured, carefully opening it to find a bookplate inside with elegant script. Luca Antonio Ricci, 1999. "You think it's cliché?" There was amusement in his voice. "The future crime lord reading Machiavelli?" I glanced up, startled by his blunt self-description. "I think it's revealing." "How so?" I chose my words carefully. Machiavelli understood that power isn't inherently moral or immoral. It's a tool. What matters is how skillfully it's wielded. I closed the book gently. "You read this at 12. You were preparing even then." His expression shifted subtly, something like surprise or respect, crossing his features before being carefully masked. "Most people misinterpret Machiavelli. Most people haven't actually read him," I countered, returning the book to him. His fingers brushed mine as he took it. The contact brief but electric. "Full of surprises, aren't you, Sophie?" Before I could respond, a phone rang somewhere on his person. He checked it with a frown, then replaced the book in its case. "Business," he said, the warmth that had crept into his voice now gone. "I need to take this. Marco will show you around the grounds while I deal with this matter." Just like that, the moment, whatever it had been, was broken. The older man appeared in the doorway as if summoned, his expression professionally neutral. "Of course," I said, trying not to show my relief at the reprieve from Luca's intense presence. "Thank you for showing me your library." He nodded, already distracted by whatever the call entailed, and left me with Marco, who led me through French doors onto manicured grounds that sloped toward the cliff's edge. "Mr. Ricci rarely shows guests his private collection," Marco commented as we walked. His tone was conversational, but I sensed an undercurrent of assessment. "It's impressive," I said noncommittally. "Indeed." He glanced at me sidelong. "You're not what I expected." "And what did you expect?" A small smile touched his weathered face. "Mr. Ricci's companions are usually more decorative than substantive." I bristled at the implication. "I'm not his companion." "No," Marco agreed, his gaze too perceptive for comfort. "You're something else entirely." We continued in silence after that, walking through gardens that would have made landscape architects weep with envy. Everything was perfect, controlled, beautiful, like Luca himself. Yet there was something hollow about it all, as if the beauty was a facade covering something darker beneath. An hour passed before Luca rejoined us, his expression unreadable as he approached. "I apologize for the interruption. Business matters can't always wait." "Of course," I said, wondering what business had required his attention. Nothing legal, certainly. Unfortunately, our day must be cut short. He gestured toward the house, where I could see the Bentley waiting in the circular drive. "Marco will take you home. We'll continue our discussion soon." The abrupt dismissal caught me off guard. "That's it? I came all this way for breakfast and a tour?" A flash of something, amusement, irritation, crossed his face. "Consider it an introduction, Sophie. There will be more meetings, I assure you." He stepped closer, into my personal space, and before I could react, he leaned down and pressed his lips to my cheek. A gesture that might have appeared affectionate to observers, but felt like a brand against my skin. "Watch for David," he murmured against my ear. "He'll come to you within the week, and Sophie..." His hand closed around my wrist, gentle but inescapable. "Remember who you belong to now." Then he released me, stepping back with perfect composure. "Until next time." I wanted to protest, to tell him I didn't belong to anyone, least of all him. But the words died in my throat. Instead, I nodded stiffly and turned toward the waiting car, feeling his gaze follow me every step of the way. As the Bentley pulled away, I caught a final glimpse of him standing on the steps of his beautiful prison, isolated in his power, watching me leave with those cold, calculating eyes. And despite everything, the threats, the manipulation, the danger he represented, I felt a confusing pang of something like loss. What was happening to me? Luca was right. David came to me exactly 4 days later. I was shelving books in the children's section, balancing on a small stepladder to reach the highest shelf, when I heard his familiar voice behind me. "Still can't reach the top shelf, huh, Sophie?" I nearly dropped the picture book in my hands, turning too quickly and wobbling on the ladder. David reached out instinctively, steadying me with a hand on my elbow, his touch lingering a moment longer than necessary. "David," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the sudden hammering of my heart. "Congratulations on your marriage. The wedding was beautiful." He smiled, that same boyish smile that had charmed me years ago, before I discovered that charm was his default setting, deployed equally with everyone from baristas to potential investors. "Thank you." He glanced around the colorful children's area, taking in the reading nooks and artwork. "The place looks great. I heard your programs have been expanding." I climbed down from the ladder, putting necessary distance between us. "Yes, thanks to a very generous anonymous donation. We've been able to extend hours and add weekend workshops." His expression revealed nothing, but I caught the slight tensing of his shoulders. Anonymous? How mysterious. Very. I shelved the last book, then turned to face him fully. "What brings you here, David? Somehow I doubt you've developed a sudden interest in picture books," he laughed, running a hand through his carefully styled hair. "Same direct Sophie. I've missed that." His expression grew more serious. "Actually, I wanted to check on you. After seeing you at the wedding with Ricci, I was concerned." There it was, exactly as Luca had predicted. The bait was taken. Concerned. I kept my tone light, curious. "Why would you be concerned about who I dance with?" David stepped closer, lowering his voice though no one was near enough to overhear. "Sophie, do you know who Luca Ricci is? What he does?" I feigned mild confusion. "He's some kind of developer, isn't he? He mentioned buildings downtown. That's his legitimate front." David's expression was grave, his concern appearing genuine, "but it's not how he made his fortune. He's dangerous, Sophie. Not someone you want to get involved with." "We just danced, David." I turned away, busying myself with straightening books that didn't need straightening. "Besides, I'm sure your new wife wouldn't appreciate you monitoring my dating choices." His hand caught my wrist, an echo of Luca's parting gesture that sent an uncomfortable shiver through me. "This isn't about Elise. It's about your safety. Ricci he's not who you think he is." I pulled my arm free, noticing how different his touch felt from Luca's. Less commanding, less affecting. "And you know this how?" He hesitated, eyes darting around the library before returning to me. "I've encountered him professionally. There are rumors, investigations. Just be careful, okay?" "I appreciate the concern," I said, softening my tone. "But really, it was just a dance." He was being kind to someone sitting alone. David studied me, doubt evident in his expression. "Luca Ricci doesn't do kindness without purpose, Sophie. If he approached you, he wants something." The irony of his warning, accurate but for entirely different reasons than he suspected, almost made me laugh. Instead, I let worry creep into my expression. "You're scaring me a little, David. What exactly are you suggesting?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair again. "Look, I shouldn't be telling you this, but..." He glanced around once more, then continued in a near whisper. "There's a federal investigation into some of Ricci's business dealings. Money laundering, specifically. If he's showing interest in you, it might be because of your connection to me." I widened my eyes, letting authentic shock show, though not for the reasons he assumed. "Why would my connection to you matter? We barely dated, and that was years ago." because of my firm's involvement with certain charitable foundations. His expression grew increasingly uncomfortable, including the one that funds this library. And there it was. The confirmation Luca needed, offered freely because David thought he was protecting me. "Wait," I said, alarm rising in my voice. "Are you saying the donation we received, did it come from him? From illegal activities?" No. David rushed to reassure me, placing his hands on my shoulders. "The money is clean by the time it reaches you. The foundation is legitimate. But the sources..." He trailed off, clearly saying more than he intended. I stepped back, wrapping my arms around myself. "I don't understand any of this, David. Why are you really here? What do you want from me?" His expression shifted, became more earnest. "I want you to be safe. If Ricci contacts you again, call me immediately." He pulled a business card from his wallet, pressing it into my palm. "Day or night. And if he asks about me, about my work, about the foundation, tell me, please." I stared at the card. Heavy stock with embossed lettering, so similar yet so different from the one Luca had given me at the wedding. "You're asking me to spy on him. I'm asking you to protect yourself," David insisted. "And yes, to help stop someone who's hurting a lot of people." The irony was almost too much to bear. Two men, both asking me to betray the other, both claiming moral high ground while standing in shadows. "I need to get back to work," I said finally, tucking the card into my pocket. "But I'll be careful, and I'll call if anything seems wrong." Relief washed over his features. "Thank you, Sophie." He hesitated, then added, "Maybe we could get coffee sometime, talk more about this? There's a lot you should know if Ricci is targeting you." I recognized the opening Luca had predicted. "I suppose that would be okay, for safety reasons." "For safety," David agreed, though something in his eyes suggested other motivations. "I'll text you." After he left, I locked myself in the staff bathroom, hands trembling as I pulled out my phone. Luca had instructed me to contact him immediately after any interaction with David, but now, faced with the reality of betraying someone, even someone potentially involved in illegal activities, my resolve wavered. What was I doing? Who was I becoming? Before I could reconsider, I typed a brief message to the number Luca had contacted me from. "David came to the library, warned me about you. Confirmed foundation connection. Wants to meet for coffee." The response came almost instantly. "Well done. Accept the coffee invitation. Car will pick you up at 8 tonight. We need to discuss strategy." My stomach twisted with dread and something else, something I refused to name. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, searching for signs of the person I'd been just days ago, before Luca Ricci had pulled me into his dark orbit. That woman was already fading, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Someone capable of deception, of betrayal. Someone who, despite everything, felt more alive than she had in years. Luca was waiting in the Bentley when it arrived outside my apartment that evening. He wore a dark suit despite the casual setting, his presence filling the spacious interior with tension and unspoken power. "Sophie," he greeted me, his voice warming slightly around my name. "Right on time." I slid into the seat beside him, immediately aware of his scent, his proximity. "Do we really need to meet in person just to discuss a coffee date? I prefer face-to-face conversations for important matters." He studied me with those penetrating eyes. "Tell me everything David said, word for word." I recounted the conversation as accurately as possible, watching Luca's expression shift subtly at key moments, the confirmation of the foundation connection, David's mention of federal investigations, his apparent concern for my safety. "Interesting," he murmured when I finished. "He's worried, more than I anticipated. He seems genuinely concerned that you're using me to get to him." Luca's mouth curved in a cold smile. "He's not entirely wrong. So what happens now?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. "You meet him for coffee, express concern about the library funding, ask innocent questions about the foundation, about the vetting process for donations." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small device. "And you'll wear this." I stared at the object in his palm, a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm. "A recording device, among other things," he confirmed. It also tracks your location for your protection. My protection, I repeated skeptically. Or your control. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. In my world, Sophie, they're the same thing. I didn't reach for the bracelet. This is crossing a line. Having coffee with him, asking questions, that's one thing. Secretly recording him is another. The line was crossed the moment you agreed to help me. His voice hardened slightly. Don't develop moral qualms now. It doesn't suit you. Doesn't suit me? I felt anger flare, hot and unexpected. You don't know the first thing about what suits me. You investigated me, threatened me, manipulated me, but you don't know me. Instead of the anger I expected in return, Luca's expression softened into something almost like admiration. There she is. I was wondering when your spine would show itself again. What are you talking about? The woman who stood up to me on the terrace, who set conditions despite being terrified. He leaned closer, his eyes intent on mine. That's the Sophie I'm interested in, not this obedient, frightened creature you've been playing at being. His words caught me off guard. Had I been playing a role, suppressing my true reactions out of fear? Take the bracelet, Sophie, he said, his voice gentler now. Not because you're afraid of what I'll do if you refuse, but because you want to know the truth as much as I do. Because part of you, the part you don't want to acknowledge, is curious, excited even. He held it out again, the silver links catching the dim light inside the car. After a long moment, I reached for it, my fingers brushing his palm as I took the bracelet. His skin was warm, the contact sending an unwelcome surge of awareness through me. How do I activate it? I asked, fastening it around my wrist. It's already active. He watched me adjust the bracelet, something like possession in his gaze. It suits you. The double meaning wasn't lost on me. This doesn't mean I'm yours, Luca. I'm doing this for the library, for the children who depend on our programs. For my mother. Not for you. Tell yourself whatever you need to. He replied, unfazed, but we both know there's more to it than that. I see it in your eyes when we're together. The same thing I felt when we danced. I looked away, unable to bear the weight of his scrutiny, the uncomfortable truth in his words. When is David likely to contact me about coffee? He allowed the subject change, though his knowing expression remained. Tomorrow or the next day. When he does, suggest Blackbird Cafe. Your usual table. Your men will be watching, I said. It wasn't a question. Always. He reached out, his fingers tilting my chin back toward him. But not just for surveillance, Sophie. For your protection. David Chen is more dangerous than you realize. The familiar warmth of Blackbird Cafe enveloped me as I entered, the scent of freshly ground coffee beans and pastries momentarily calming my frayed nerves. David was already waiting at my usual window table, 2 steaming mugs before him. He stood when he saw me, that perfect smile in place. I remembered you like their vanilla latte, he said, gesturing to one of the mugs. Thank you. I slid into the seat across from him, hyper-aware of the silver bracelet on my wrist. It felt heavier than its delicate appearance suggested, weighted with betrayal and secrets. I'm glad you agreed to meet, David said, his expression earnest. I've been worried since our conversation at the library. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, avoiding his gaze. I've been thinking about what you said, about the donation to the library. I glanced up, watching his reaction carefully. Could it really be tainted money? David leaned forward, lowering his voice. The situation is complicated, Sophie. The foundation itself is legitimate. It does real good work, but some of its funding sources are questionable. Like Luca Ricci, I prompted. His expression tightened. Among others. Men like Ricci use charities to clean their money, make it appear legitimate. They get tax benefits, positive PR, and a way to move funds that won't trigger regulatory flags. And so our children's programs are being funded by criminal activities? I let genuine distress color my voice. That's horrifying. The money itself isn't the problem, David clarified, reaching across the table to cover my hand with his. The gesture felt hollow compared to Luca's controlled touches. The good work you're doing remains good. But the source... I pulled my hand away, fidgeting with my bracelet. Has he contacted me again, Luca. David's posture changed instantly, alert and tense. When? What did he want? He invited me to his home, I admitted, the partial truth feeling safer than complete lies. It was overwhelming, beautiful, but cold somehow. He has this incredible library. He showed you his collection? David seemed genuinely surprised. That's unusual. He's notoriously private about his personal spaces. I shrugged, feigning confusion. He said he appreciated my knowledge of books. But David, he never mentioned you, or the foundation, or anything financial. He just talked to me. About literature, about my work. David's brow furrowed. That doesn't make sense. Unless... His expression shifted, realization dawning. Unless he's playing a longer game. Building trust before using you. Using me for what exactly? I pressed. You keep hinting at things but never speaking plainly. If you want my help, I need to understand what I'm involved in. He hesitated, internal conflict visible on his features. Finally, he sighed. Sophie, the less you know, the safer you are. But I can tell you this. Ricci believes I've taken something that belongs to him. Money, specifically. He's been looking for leverage against me for months. And you think I'm that leverage because we dated briefly years ago? Because of who you are, David corrected. Honest, genuine. Someone I still care about, despite everything. His eyes softened. He'll try to use that against me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Both men claiming the other was using me, both manipulating my emotions for their purposes. Yet somehow, Luca's straightforward coercion felt less insulting than David's emotional manipulation masked as concern. If you really think I'm in danger, I said carefully, maybe you should tell me more about what's really going on, where the money came from, where it's going. David's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, frowning. I have to take this. It's the office. Excuse me for a moment. As he stepped outside to take the call, I noticed a leather portfolio he'd left on his chair. The zipper was partially open, a folder visible inside with the foundation's logo embossed on it. Without allowing myself to reconsider, I reached across and quickly pulled the folder out, snapping a photo of the papers inside with my phone, before returning it exactly as I'd found it. David returned moments later, his expression troubled. I'm sorry, Sophie. There's an issue at work I need to handle immediately. He gathered his things, oblivious to my theft. Can we continue this conversation soon? Maybe dinner this weekend? Of course, I agreed, feeling the weight of the stolen information like a stone in my stomach. I hope everything's okay. Just business complications. He hesitated, then leaned down to kiss my cheek. Be careful, Sophie. And call me if Ricci contacts you again. Promise me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without betraying my guilt. As he hurried from the cafe, I sat motionless, the vanilla latte cooling untouched before me. What had I become? A spy? A thief? A betrayer of trust? All in the span of a week. Outside the window, I caught a glimpse of a black sedan parked across the street. One of Luca's men, undoubtedly. Always watching, he'd said. The bracelet felt suddenly tight around my wrist, a beautiful shackle connecting me to a man who had upended my carefully constructed life. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Rooftop. Now. L. I looked up instinctively, spotting the sleek silhouette of the building across the street, its rooftop garden just visible from my vantage point. He was here? Had been watching the entire time? Against my better judgment, I left money for the untouched drinks and walked across the street. The building's security guard nodded at me as if expecting my arrival, directing me to a private elevator that required a keycard he provided. The elevator rose silently to the top floor, opening directly onto a stunning rooftop garden with panoramic views of the city. Luca stood at the edge, his back to me, hands clasped behind him as he surveyed the urban landscape below. He didn't turn as I approached, though I knew he was aware of my presence. Did you get what I needed? He asked, his voice carrying on the light breeze. I took photos of some documents from his portfolio, I admitted, stopping several feet behind him. Though I'm not sure what they mean, he turned then, his pale eyes searching mine. Show me. I hesitated, suddenly realizing this was a point of no return. Until now, I'd been playing both sides, telling myself I was merely gathering information. But handing over those photos would be a definitive act of betrayal, of David, of my own principles. What will happen to him? I asked. To David, when this is over. That depends entirely on what's in those documents. Luca stepped closer, his expression unreadable, and on his willingness to return what he took. And if he doesn't, or can't? A shadow crossed Luca's features. Then choices will be made. Consequences will follow. He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek in that now familiar gesture that sent unwelcome warmth through me. But you have my word. No unnecessary violence. I'm a businessman, Sophie, not a monster. A businessman who threatens people's families, their livelihoods, their homes? I challenged, not backing away from his touch despite myself. Those seem like the tactics of someone who crossed the line from business to monstrosity long ago. Instead of anger, his response was a genuine smile that transformed his face, softening the hard angles into something almost boyish. There she is again, the woman who isn't afraid to speak truth to power. Stop saying that, I snapped, irritated by his apparent delight in my defiance. I'm not your entertainment. No, he agreed, his smile fading into something more serious. You're much more than that, Sophie, more than you realize. Before I could respond, he closed the remaining distance between us, one hand cupping my face while the other settled at my waist. Familiar positions from our dance, yet infinitely more intimate in this private setting. I knew from the moment I saw you sitting alone at that wedding, he murmured, his thumb tracing my cheekbone, that you were different, authentic in a world of pretenders, loyal in a sea of opportunists. Loyal? I repeated incredulously. I just betrayed someone's trust. I stole private documents. I'm wearing a recording device you gave me. And it's tearing you apart, he observed, his eyes never leaving mine. The conflict between what you believe is right and what you're willing to do to protect what matters to you. That struggle is what makes you different, Sophie. What makes you valuable. To your business, I said bitterly. To me. The simple declaration hung in the air between us, weighted with implications I wasn't prepared to examine. I pulled away, needing distance from his magnetic presence to think clearly. This isn't what I agreed to, Luca. Using me to trap David was one thing. Whatever this is, I gestured between us. It wasn't part of the deal. No, he acknowledged, allowing me the space I'd claimed. It wasn't expected. By either of us, I think. We stood in silence for a moment, the city spread before us, oblivious to our private drama unfolding above it. Finally, I pulled out my phone, unlocking it to reveal the photos I'd taken. Here, I said, offering it to him. The documents you wanted. After this, I'm done. I've fulfilled my part of our bargain. He accepted the phone, his fingers brushing mine in the exchange. As he scrolled through the images, his expression hardened, cold calculation replacing the warmth of moments before. This is it, he said, more to himself than to me. The proof I needed. The entire network, every account, every transfer. So it's over? I asked, hope flaring briefly. You'll leave David alone now? And me? Luca looked up from the phone, his gaze penetrating. It's over for David, yes. These records are enough to recover what was taken. He handed the phone back to me. But for us, Sophie, this is just the beginning. There is no us, I insisted, though my voice lacked conviction even to my own ears. You threatened me, coerced me. That's not a foundation for anything. Perhaps not, he conceded. But neither of us can deny what's happened between us, what continues to happen every time we're together. Before I could formulate a response, he reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, offering it to me. Your reward, as promised. I stared at the envelope, making no move to take it. I don't want your money. It's not money, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Open it. Cautiously, I accepted the envelope, breaking the seal to find documents inside. Legal papers I didn't immediately understand until I saw my mother's name. I looked up at him, confusion giving way to disbelief. "You've transferred her to the private wing of Lakeside Care Center," I whispered. That facility costs more than I make in a year." "She'll receive the best care available for the rest of her life," Luca confirmed. "Additionally, the children's programs at your library now have a permanent endowment, clean money, from legitimate businesses, before you ask. Your career, your mother, your passion projects, all secure." Tears pricked at my eyes, emotions too complex to name washing through me. Why? Why do all this? Luca stepped forward again, his hands coming to rest lightly on my shoulders. "Because some things, once found, are too valuable to lose." His meaning was unmistakable, hanging in the air between us like a tangible thing. I should have been repulsed, should have rejected everything he represented. Instead, I found myself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by something I couldn't explain or resist. "I'm not a possession, Luca," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I can't be bought or owned." "No," he agreed softly. "You can only be earned, and I'm a very patient man, Sophie." As the sun set behind the city skyline, painting the rooftop in gold and amber, I realized with startling clarity that I stood at a crossroads. Behind me lay the safe, predictable life I'd always known. Ahead, a path shrouded in shadow and light, danger and protection, with this enigmatic man who saw value in me that others had missed. The choice, despite everything, despite all logic and reason, had already been made. Perhaps it had been made the moment he'd approached my table at the wedding and said those first fateful words. "Act like you're with me. Only now, it would no longer be an act.